Hello, my name is Louis and this is Crash Build. Today we're going to be looking at a very specific problem with the Mark III prusa. Now this is a 3D printer, a very popular one and a very reliable one, and up until now it's been absolutely fantastic. So this is not a complaint and this is certainly not some sort of negative criticism of the way that the printer is designed. But basically put, gradually over the last few months I'd say, I've seen a gradual degradation in print quality, particularly printing at high temperatures and particularly printing for long periods of time. You'll tend to find that some prints sort of look like each layer is misaligned. Now on my prints it's kind of unusual because the prints only look misaligned on one axis. I'll put up a video of the exact problem. But essentially it looks like the layers have been shifted across, specifically on the y-axis for me. So I began to suspect that it was some sort of a maintenance task or something that I needed to be doing with the printer that I obviously wasn't doing. Because I'm a terrible human being and I never maintain anything properly and I have a tendency to just run printers into the ground. So first I investigated the y-axis to try and figure out exactly what part of the y-axis was responsible. I took the 3D printed bed off, I had a look at the bearings underneath and noticed that they were all loose. Literally all of them were loose. So the whole thing unanimously had come apart. So I tightened all that up and I was moving around the bed and found that there was still a sort of a clicking, rattling kind of noise. With machines, you can tend to find that noises give things away. Like if the machine is not working properly, if it's like moving reciprocally and you can hear a kind of like an occasional clunk kind of noise, then you usually know just instinctively that there's something wrong. So it was the same with me. So I carried on investigating and I found also that there were a series of things that were all largely just all loose. There were no broken components. I just found that perhaps over long periods, lots of heat cycles, which cause obviously metals to contract and expand, that basically everything had come loose. So let me get the term right, I think they just call it the gear, for the y-axis belt had come loose. So that was moving sort of side to side, and it meant that essentially whenever the motor was rotating, whenever it stopped, the gear would also want to go a bit further, and then when it changed direction and stopped again, it would then rotate back the other way. So there was this sort of slop in the movement of the y-axis, which was causing it to not align with itself every single time a sharp y-axis move was made. And all of this was sort of building up. Also the belts weren't very tight as well, so when the y-axis belt is loose, you sort of get this elastic band effect where the belt can move one direction a little bit extra and it sort of oscillates, and then it moves back the other way and oscillates again. So you have this aggregate of effect of all these different issues all adding up to make really bad prints. So as you'll see in the video, everything sort of adds up, and I sort of right all of these wrongs and finally pull my head out of my bottom and actually start doing some maintenance, and the result is this. Really quite actually incredible prints. The reason why I sort of fell in love with this printer in the first place and why it's been so strongly recommended by so many YouTubers, 3D printing experts, all different kinds of people who all very heavily rely on this machine on a day-to-day basis. Very impressive levels of reliability and print quality. So as per usual with most electronic devices, the problem is not in the computer, so to speak, the problem is in the chair. and it was definitely the case this time. If you are seeing any of these types of artifacts, so layer shifting, where an object looks a little bit like a poorly stacked Jenga pile, or if you're finding that layers are delaminating very easily and the geometries all don't line up, or maybe you've got the same exact problem as me, where it just looks like one face is sort of disjointed, whereas all the other faces seem to be perfectly fine, then look first to the mechanics of your printer. Make sure nothing's loose, make sure the belts aren't loose, make sure the bed is properly aligned. Maybe give the thing a little rattle, maybe give it a little shake just to see whether or not there's any give, any of the components. Obviously, a lot of these printers have belts, so those are semi-elastic. They're not supposed to be too elastic, they're also not supposed to be too taut, because that could induce a lot of extra wear or create a lot of extra friction that's not necessary for movement. But just check these things out, poke and prod around, and make sure you're not hearing any weird noises or any sort of unusual sounds that you're not used to when the printer operates. And that should give you a fair indication as to what's going on. So hopefully that's helped. I really hope that's helped anyone who's got themselves into the similar situation as me. Obviously now really is the case for or the time for preventative maintenance, so I definitely need to start oiling the machine up. I probably should look into replacing some of the LM8UU bearings, maybe with better brands. I know that some of the other channels have recommended that maybe you go into like Masumi, for example, which is a mechanism and mechanics parts sort of sales group, to get some higher grade parts, because if you're doing what I'm doing, where you're just running it for hours at a time at very high temperatures, you're not really ever giving it a break, then generally you may see some advantage from those sorts of upgrades. So again, I really hope that was helpful. Thank you very much for watching. This has been Crash Build, this has been Louis, and yeah, until the next one.